to turn on the recording. So here we are, Business Resilience Now. And thanks for joining us. And before we get to the serious stuff, though, I love to look at the lighter side. So I've pulled up a couple of memes. I hope you don't mind. I think we have to laugh. Laughter builds the immune system, doesn't it, Derrick? Absolutely. So, if you're wondering what to get somebody for Easter, you can see the 2020 Easter basket, lots of Clorox and in there, And I like that next one. If you need 144 rolls of toilet paper for a 14-day quarantine, you probably should have been seeing a doctor long before COVID-19, right? And all these people, who would have thought in a country like Canada with more forests than anywhere that we'd have a run on toilet paper of all things, right? So a couple more though. Love this one, 911, what's your emergency? Hello, there's 11 people hanging out together and one of them has the sniffles, right? And everyone's freaking out, when someone has the sniffles. They get the evil eye in the grocery store. And I like that next one. Reminds me of a guy who's on the call, Steven, because he did this. They said a mask and gloves were enough to go to the grocery store. They lied. Everyone else had clothes on. So Steven, he's my friend, but he went to the grocery store, nothing but mask and gloves on. He had goggles too, by the way, but that just made him look more creepy, So I hope you don't mind a little bit of COVID humor. A couple more. Just check out that screen right there for a moment. It's so good. Me after washing my hands for 20 seconds 57 times in one day, right? And there's the planet Earth speaking coronavirus. Shutdowns have unintended climate benefits, right? We got to do this more often. So there's a lot of, maybe even some truth to that. We don't want to go too far. And I did share this one last week, but I thought I'd share it again because it's so good, especially if you grew up in the 80s. I'm no expert on COVID-19, but this is the cure. All right. Nothing wrong with that. And a lot of people are like, my mantra in 2019, stay away from negative people. Well, guess what? 2020, stay away from COVID positive people. So anyways, honestly, though, in all seriousness, COVID-19 has had 5 major impacts, probably a whole bunch more. I think it's had a health impact for sure. I mean, we hear about that every day. It's definitely had a social impact. I think it's had a people impact, and it's had an emotional impact on people. I mean, this has been the stress of a lot of people's lives, the most traumatic event that they've ever experienced. And then lastly, a business and economic impact. And so that means we've got to change the way we manage our lives, our career, and our business. It's just that simple. You can't do what you've always done because if you do what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. And right now, you just can't do that. So it really takes an opportunity for some creativity. So I noticed a bunch more people jumping on. This is fantastic. Please do jump in the chat window. Tell us your name, please, if you can, and tell us where you're from. So, what's the solution? Well, the great news is we don't have a be-all and end-all solution. I don't think we've got a box or a cookie cutter solution. But I do think that the solution is always in conversations, right? It's always in getting smart people together, people who have lived some life, who have experienced some things, learning what you can, and being in a position where you're getting a little bit more wisdom than you had before because of the interaction and the engagement of other people. So, nice to see you, Glenn. Hi, Glenn. Just go in the chat window, and that's great, guys. And we'd love to hear from you, Glenn, and where are you from? And so, today on our call, and, we've been bringing together some real business titans, I think, and so you can tune into our past episodes, drop me a note and we can get those to you. But today we've got probably the biggest legend of business and authenticity of them all, Mr. Derrick Sweet. Now his bio is on the screen, but his bio doesn't quite do him justice. I first met Derrick in 2007 when I sent him an email, and I was looking for training as a life coach. I was in a place in my life where things weren't going well for me. I had lost almost everything, and I could count on one hand the number of friends that I had. and I don't blame them. I was not in a good place. And yet I thought to myself, as bad as I am right now, as bad as I felt, I still believed that I had some value to give to people. Not in my current form, but with some work, some polish, some learning. And so I remember reaching out to Derrick and asking about Certified Coaches Federation and their training and certification process. And I was surprised that Derrick himself phoned me, the next day. And, I was at the time living in Halifax. I was in a 1-bedroom apartment, and my kids were living in this town called Truro. And I mean, it was just a crazy time. I was really not in a good place in a lot of ways, but that's if you looked on the outside. When you look on the inside, you would have seen the seed of hope and the seed of growth and the seed of possibility in my life. And I think that Derrick has always been that kind of a man who looks beyond the surface and believes the best about people. Derrick is the founder and the chair of the Certified Coaches Federation and Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. He's a good friend. I really see him as a big brother, as a mentor, as a coach. And so welcome, Derrick. We're so honored to have you today. Good
to be here, sir.
So Derrick, why don't you tell folks, I mean, I've done my best to introduce you, and you know how deeply I love you and respect you, but why don't you tell folks a little bit about your business journey, how your kind of career started and how you ended up where you are today. You must have exceeded your own expectations for yourself, and you're not even done yet, right? So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Well, I started off in business. I was a money manager on Bay Street for quite a while, and kind of living two lives, a student of self-improvement since I was 16. Long story short, I was a high school dropout at 16, and I hitchhiked across Canada. I was a bit of a troublemaker, I guess you could say. Had a lot of energy. And my mom gave me a copy of Dr. Wayne Dyer's book called The Sky's the Limit.
Okay.
And it's quite a story because it redefined my focus, my perspective, and my values. And I started studying self-improvement then. And I was just doing it because it felt good, and I was learning and I was growing. But my primary focus in my younger days was to create wealth. And obviously the best way to create wealth, at least at the time, was to work in the financial services sector.
Okay. And then what happened?
Well, then, like a lot of us, you've heard this saying that we all have these kind of pivotal turning points in our life. And I had been studying self-improvement since about 25 years at the time. And I wrote my first book called Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. And I had two careers. I was speaking on my book, Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. And by the way, back then, Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise was just me, myself, and I.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, I was managing money for about 400 families.
Okay.
And I had to make a choice, and the choice was difficult to make, and the choice was to serve others around this constant challenge that we have in society, which is to get out of our own way. I'm really fascinated by the process of learning how to think at a level that is liberating. And I always say, our coaching program isn't about any one thing as much as it is about learning how to get out of your own way. And that's, I look at the people on this call, and I get so excited because all these people on this call today are people who share the passion that you and I have, Abe, and that is learning and growing and more importantly, sharing what we've learned to help others grow. So that's our business. And here we are. So we started CCF. At first it was Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise, and just me as a speaker. And I could have another conversation with you about how awful I was at public speaking. That's another story. Maybe I'll come back and we'll talk about that.
That's awesome.
And then we started the Certified Coaches Federation in 2006, and it was just me, right? And all I had was this deck of slides on PowerPoint, and I printed them off, and that was the binder we gave everyone in the class. And I remember in the early days, people would complain, and they would say to me things like, "It's not a very impressive binder." And I said, "Well, you're right, it's not. But for me, it wasn't about the binder. It was about the coming together and the learning and the growing. And the binder was just like, oh, by the way, if you want to, you know, take some notes on the slides, here you go. So we've come a long way, obviously, since 2006. We have your leadership, and, you know, you played a phenomenal role in making sure our binders look much better at the very least. So, you know, so we did that. So from 2006 to 2013, we had 7 years of phenomenal growth, over 12,000, 13,000 grads. At that time, I think it was around 11,000 grads. And we started to look at coaching, and we realized that it's a great industry because it's about helping people and making a difference. But to be honest, most people weren't making a living, not a good living, and most people weren't able to make that transition from going from part-time to full-time. They just couldn't make the income. So we created the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise coaching program, which would, and still does, provide the content, the back office support, the marketing and the branding and the income structure to allow people to make that transition to go from, wow, wouldn't that be great to work from home like we're all doing now, but full-time, and serve others at a higher level and, you know, replace and maybe even surpass the income I'm making as whatever you're doing right now. And it's been a long journey. We started this again in 2014. And, you know, this is something I don't really talk about that much, Abe. Between 2014, 15, 16, and 17, our growth was so slow.
Right.
I mean, like turtle pace. No, a turtle would be faster than our growth. It was slow. It was, and the thing is, we had great content. We were improving the content, and we weren't growing. Then all of a sudden, boom, 2018 happened, and our membership grew at 500%.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a big lesson in that. And the lesson, of course, is in resilience. And this is something, Abe, you and I talk about at length. We talk about resilience, tenacity, purpose. You know, I mean, results are important, but more important than results, and what leads to results, is why you're doing whatever you're doing, you know? And for us, it was about serving others and giving them the resources. And we just realized that if we kept improving the content, people would come.
Right.
So I did.
And so tell me, Derrick, like, so somebody's on the call right now and they're looking at their life and their business and they're like, you know, I need results. But you're telling me it's about resilience. What can we say to them? You know, when you looked at what we were doing and the long journey to get where collectively we are today, you know, there had to be that tenacity. So how can somebody kind of develop that on the fly?
Well, first of all, I want to say if anyone's on this webinar today and you're struggling, you know, I feel for you. I've been there. You know, Abe has been there. We've been there. And we're here today to offer some kind of support and answer some of your questions. But the advice I can give you in the meantime, and it may seem kind of shallow and not immediate, but it is nonetheless important. And that is to hold the intention of the kind of life you want to create for yourself and your family and your future. And if you can combine that with how you want to serve others, you have a winning formula. You really do. Because to be resilient, you have to have that push. You have to have that wind when there is no wind. And that wind that I'm talking about is your internal wind.
Yeah.
You know, and that wind comes from your own belief. And we talk a lot about this in Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise, your belief infrastructure as far as what's possible for you and others.
It's great.
And I know for some of you right now struggling, wondering where your mortgage money is going to come from next month. That might not be enough. And I get that. I know I probably would have heard that many times in my life and thought, well, that's not enough. And my advice is just think about it a little bit more, because, you know, none of us woke up yesterday or last week or last month or today with the intention to feel stressed out. Think about it. No one woke up today with the intention to be nervous or anxious or worried, right? Our intention, if you think about it, our intention is our divine self, our higher self, our best self, our pure self. But for a lot of people, life gets in the way. and it gets in the way for a lot of reasons, primarily around our internal infrastructure of beliefs and ongoing feelings around certain things and people and events and frustrations and opportunities. And these thoughts and feelings create this other infrastructure around expectations, right? A lot of us have expectations unconsciously that hold us back.
Right.
But the thing is about being, defiant and resilient, you can redefine, renegotiate that infrastructure. You can create new expectations as far as what does this mean? What does COVID-19 mean? Well, besides the obvious suffering and death and destruction and all that, I mean, the purpose of today's webinar is really to talk about you and your business and resilience despite the obvious economic slowdown.
Yeah.
Again, we can say, what does this mean? We can ask ourselves, what does this mean? And here's the thing, if you're in a bad place right now, your answer might be pretty bad. It might not be very helpful when you say, wow, this means I'm not going to make my mortgage payment. I don't know how I'm going to feed my kids. I mean, that's real. But you can say another answer that will allow you to live through, and this is important, allow you to live through your intention. Because again, your intention has no weakness. It's strong. It's resilient. It's everything you want and everything you want to be and everything you are right now. You might not think that, but that's the power of intention. So again, coming back to that question, what could, if not does, what could this challenge mean to me? Well, it could mean that I have an opportunity to prove to myself how creative I am,
Right.
how driven I am, and more importantly, what's important to me, what matters most to me.
Right. So you talked, and you talked about the why and how important that is. So when we talk about our why, our reason for doing what we're doing, what's interesting to me is it's in those hard times that your why gets challenged the most, right? Like it's easy to have a why when everything is great, but when, like you're saying, the mortgage is on the line, when you're having a hard time making ends meet. So, number one, maybe how can someone discover that why? And then number two, what does it really mean to lean into it?
Well, it was interesting as you were introducing me, saying about all these things, and you're saying, "Oh, Derrick, you must be happy." I'm content. I'm content, but I feel like I'm nowhere near my stride yet. You know what I mean? Like,
okay.
I feel like my life is still a series of struggles, right?
Okay.
And a series of challenges and a series of roadblocks. And I think you would agree that that's where you're at too, because that's the constant when you're growing, right? It's a series of struggles and roadblocks and setbacks. It just doesn't end. But then we get hit with this COVID-19 and it's like makes all our other 5-foot, hurdles look like nothing, because now we're at maybe a 500-foot hurdle. And for many people that's real. So it's we've been talking a lot in the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise coaching program about lately, and it's ironic that it's so timely. Just before this thing hit, we were talking about leaning into the wind, remember? And how important it is to lean into the wind. Then we get a hurricane, coming out of Mach 10. And so if you lean into what scares you, or if you lean into what threatens you, that's when you discover who you really are.
Yeah.
And that's when you discover something that you may not have believed in. And that is you're a lot stronger and a lot more creative and resilient than you know.
Yes.
But, and this is important, you're not going to know that unless you lean into the challenge. Well, how do I do that? Let me give you an example. Let's just say you're afraid of public speaking.
Yeah.
I used to be afraid of public speaking.
Yeah.
Normal, totally normal.
Yeah.
Lean into it, by joining something like Toastmasters, and you do your table topics, which is a thing they have that's very popular, and you do your 10 speeches. That's leaning into it.
Yeah.
And you discover that, maybe at first your discovery is, I'm not as nervous as I thought I would be. And that's success. And then the next level of success is, I wasn't nervous during my fourth speech.
Yeah.
And then the next level of success is, wow, did I ever enjoy giving that speech?
Yes.
You know, that's leaning into the wind. And, you know, you think of all your various challenges, and we can talk about all the expectations that will follow, you'll discover when you lean into the wind. So here we are, you know, what we have right now is a prime example of leaning into the wind. But before, you know, we're going to get into, hopefully we're going to have some questions. I just want to be real here. When this first happened, I had some bad days, you know, when this happened, because, you know, we have hundreds and hundreds of people in our program, and when this happened, we just realized that their income was going to be hit hard. And I had a few bad days, and I want to be clear here. You know, where I'm at in life doesn't mean, and where Abe's at doesn't mean we don't have bad days. Of course we do. And of course they'll happen again. We're human beings. That's not the point. The point is, what do you do when you have a bad day? I think, in my opinion, and I think you'll agree with this, Abe, what defines a happy life, not to mention success, but just being happy, comes down to how quick you go back to your mean, your normal sense of, you know, who you are, and how in alignment you have become with your intention.
Yes.
That to me is success. And I think, you know, no matter what we're talking about around success or resilience, it always comes back to that. What kind of coping strategies do you have to get back to neutral? And equally important, what kind of movement strategies do you have to take your life forward and start to achieve some of your personal, professional, spiritual, and financial goals?
Absolutely. That's so good, Derrick. You know, and it's funny because, you know, this morning, you know, I have a quiet time every day. And for me, it's, I do some scripture and some meditation and get my guitar and often.
Whoa, you play guitar?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. All these years, these little fingers, yeah. And and so, yeah, we should have a jam session sometime.
Yeah.
But it's funny because I hadn't journaled since February 19th. Now, I wouldn't say I'm an avid journaler, but typically I journal a lot more consistently than that. For whatever reason, I just hadn't. And what I read on February 19th was, and this was just February 19th, folks, so less than 2 months ago, I was in a dark place. Like I wrote down, because I'd had a couple of disappointments and some setbacks, or at least what I perceived to be. And I just was journaling and talking about, you know, when are things going to turn around? And it's so funny because, you know, a lot of people would look at me or you and think that we don't have those days. And like, hey, like just this morning, I'm looking at it and I was thinking about how different my world has been since February 19th, you know, and in a lot of ways, the world has gotten worse economically and financially and all of these storms. And yet I'm in such a better place. And so, you know, no matter where you're at, you can change, right? No matter what you're experiencing today, there's always hope and there's always possibility. But so much, I think, is about being honest with yourself, right? And being aware of where you're at. And so, folks, I'm going to ask Derrick another question here in a moment, but I'd love to have you put your hand up, you know, in Zoom. And then if you can, I can actually turn on your audio, and I'd love to hear you ask a question. I think that would be great of Derrick. And Derrick, my question for you is, you know, so what would you say to business people right now? You know, any strategies or tactics to help them get through this current storm?
Real well, I could be a little bit more specific if I had like a question from a specific business owner, but there's a lot of constants no matter what kind of business you're in. That comes back to how do I serve my people? How do I serve my clients? What do they need now more than ever? If you can do that, and by the way, it may not include you making money off of that answer. That's fine. Maybe it's something long-term that's going to help your business. But what does my client need right now more than anything? You need to answer that. I mean, we did Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. We're introducing our Platinum Pro in May. So.
And it's interesting because even that shows the need to iterate. So we've got Christopher Hayward, Derrick. He's watching via Facebook Live, and he says hello.
Oh, I know Christopher.
Yeah. Nice to hear from you, Christopher. That's fantastic. So when it comes to somebody who's seeking to get more presence on social media in the middle of this particular crisis, what would you say about that?
It's funny, I'm the wrong guy to ask because I'm not really on social media. I have my Facebook friends and that's it. And by the way, I'm glad you asked because I want you to know that you can build your business without a huge following on social media. In fact, I've reduced my following by 60% in the last few years on purpose, because I wanted to drill down specifically who I want to serve. And I can't serve everybody. My niche is relatively small.
Yeah.
So you don't have to have a huge presence on social media at all. Okay. And again, I'm not the person to answer that question. Abe, you're much more qualified to answer that than I am.
Well, I mean, one of the things I think you do really well, Derrick, and I think this is really important for anyone who's out there, who's listening and wondering is you have to be real, and I think what's so great about you, Derrick, is you're not just all about business. You have, you've got horses and you've got motorbikes and you've got, 100-acre farm, right? And I just think that's so critical, right? Because it keeps you grounded, but it also allows your clients to see you as just a real person. And that's really important,
Yeah. Yeah. And, you mentioned being real. That's one thing I'm very happy about with the leadership in Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. I mean, the authentic leadership we have, we always say in our program that there's no gurus among us. If anything, we're all students. And when you remember, this is important, when you remember that you don't know, there's more that you don't know than you know. Think about that. When you remember that there's more that you don't know than you know, how can you not remain two things? They both start with H. One is humble, because you're not going to be arrogant when you realize there's more you don't know than you know, right? So you're going to be humble, hopefully.
Awesome.
And the other one, and Abe and I love this other one, you're going to remain hungry.
Yeah.
Hungry to learn and grow and expand. Like I was saying before we started the webinar today, I'm learning Spanish, and every day I learn roughly a minimum of 30 words. And every time I learn a word, I just jump out of my skin. And like even crazy words that I know I'm never going to say. I just learned, I can't remember what it is now, but I learned so many words every day. I'm like, well, when am I ever going to say that? I don't know, but when the day comes,
absolutely,
I'm going to say it with so much zest.
That's right. That's right.
Cowbell. Oh, cowbell.
Love that. Love it. So how could somebody stay grounded through all of this then? What kind of routines and practices do you have?
Well, let me answer that in two parts, Abe. First of all, I wasn't grounded at all when this thing first happened. I was annoyed. Can you relate? I was annoyed. I was upset. I was frustrated. I was concerned. I was worried. I was all the things that we don't want to be, all the things that we say our intent, it's not part of our intention, but that's a thing. Yeah. I'm not going to tell you that, I was just I was calm and I was serene and I was meditating. Yeah. And I knew. No way. And I think that's why the relationships, Abe, you and I have with our clients and our friends and our community in Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise, I think that's why we have them, because our community, including this webinar, it's not about coming across as, look at Abe and I, we know everything. No, we don't. No. We struggle as much as the next person does. Yeah. Maybe the only difference between us and the people who struggle more is we ask more questions. We ask more questions on what's important as far as getting out of our own way. And that's something that this webinar is about, our program's about. The best conversations are about is, how do I get out of my own way? So the second part of your question, Abe, for me to and this is important, to regain my balance. And maybe some of you on the call, you haven't regained your balance yet. Maybe you're still at a place where I was a few weeks ago, where I was like frustrated.
Yeah.
I knew that wasn't home. We talk a lot about this in our program, going home. What's home? It's a place where you feel at home. You feel confident, you feel accepted, you feel like you're in your power. So what I do to go back home is I do the things that make me feel good, you know, like playing my guitar, being around my animals, reading. I love to learn. If I'm learning, I feel good, and that gets me centered. And again, the answer is different for everybody, but you got to think, what's going to make me feel good right now in a way that's good for your body and it's good for the environment, it's good for everyone. I don't mean like go get drunk. That might make you feel good, but that's not what I mean. I mean like what's good for me,
Yes.
what's good for my soul. And Abe, you were talking about journaling, and it's funny you mentioned that because I started journaling when I was about 16.
Okay.
And I journaled until I was probably in my early 40s.
Okay.
And maybe mid 40s. And
Yeah.
then I stopped. I haven't journaled in about 10 years. It's interesting you mentioned that because I wrote 3 books, and I can tell you what, I wouldn't have written any of them if I wasn't journaling. So
Yeah.
I want to get back into that. I think that's such a great thing for us all to kind of get centered, you know, write how you're feeling, what your hopes are, what you're concerned about, etc. It's just wonderful therapy.
I agree. So powerful. So we've got a question here from Deanna. Deanna, I'm going to turn you on here so you can talk. So just go ahead, Deanna, and give us your question.
Okay. Hello, you can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Awesome. First, just thanks to you both for your honesty and vulnerability. It makes me feel better to know that, you know, our leadership team is dealing with some of the same things I am. My question is, how do I continue to help people see the opportunity that is before them with this whole struggle, while still being really sensitive to the things and those real traumas that folks are going through? I just, you know, for so many folks, like there's such an opportunity for growth here, and I just really want to be careful and empathetic and everything at the same time.
I hear what you're saying. Abe, you want me to take a stab at that?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, it really depends on the business model you're in now. If you're in our business,
Yeah.
Marketing our Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise coaching program, there's always going to be someone, depending on how big your social circle is, someone who's not going to like what comes out of your mouth. If you're saying anything about making money, how could you dare talk about that during this time? That's their belief system. It's okay. It's not about you. It's where they're at. But there's also a way to do it where you're coming from a place of love and of kindness and support. So I think as long as you acknowledge what's going on around you, and you just don't go into, hey, we're having a COVID 50% off sale. Don't do that. That's no good. So maybe a better approach is like, hey, you know, maybe I have a message. And by the way, I'm just kind of being spontaneous right now, so I don't know exactly what I'm going to say, but let me just kind of riff along here, as we say, as us guitar players say, Abe.
That's right.
So I may say something if I'm reaching out to people who are coaches or consultants. I may say something like, hey, this has been a very challenging time, especially if you're working in the coaching business. Just remember that your clients need to hear from you today more than ever. So make sure you're there for them. Make sure you're reaching out to them. Make sure they know you're available if they need someone to talk to.
Yeah.
At the same time, also understand that there's never, ever been a better time to reach out to people who can benefit from your expertise and your passion for helping people.
Yeah.
Something like that, you know? And then I'd get into my coaching program, and, you know, whatever, I'd say something to introduce it. Like, I'm having a great way to build your coaching practice is free webinars. And I mean, with technology today, there's never been a better opportunity to get out there, get your face out there, get your voice out there, get your ideas out there. But again, you know, you have to do it in good taste.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Deanna. And, you know, to be honest, I think that's such a great question because of the fact that, you know, truthfully, people can't receive until they feel safe, right? And you know, you can have all the business strategy in the world, you can have all kinds of brilliant flow charts and flip charts and you name it, but until people feel safe, the actual parts of their brain that need to be activated in order for them to create new change aren't active. And so the very first thing you want to try to do is create safety and stability, right? Show leadership, show that you know, not that you're in this place where you're acting like everything is okay. Be vulnerable, but also let them know, hey, we've got this. We're going to get through this together, right? That the sky isn't falling, and I think what that communicates to people is that, you know, hey, sensible people still have a plan. I mean, you know, all of us have noticed that people aren't rational right now. You know, like, you know, if you can have a run on toilet paper in Canada with more forests than all of Europe combined, you know, you've got a problem, right? Clearly, you're not being rational, and that's where we are. So you don't throw stones at somebody for being irrational. You empathize. You create connection and you create safety, and then it's in that place that folks begin moving forward. You know, the truth is, this is a tough one, but I do a lot of business coaching, and some businesses were done before this thing came. And so some of them may even need to have the tough conversation around, is it time to grieve the old, right? Let go of what they were doing. And a lot of the time, especially with entrepreneurs, there's an emotional attachment, right? There's an emotional connection, and then maybe explore something new, right? And maybe COVID, as tough as it is for some, will be that tipping point to get them to a place where they say, okay, you know, what I was doing wasn't really working anyways. So what now can I try? Because, you know, the definition of insanity is trying to do the same thing over and over again, right? Expecting different results. So if you got a question, folks, please throw your hand up. And just like Deanna did, we'd love to give you a chance to ask it. You know, so Derrick, in the COVID environment, when you think about sort of the markets, and I know you spend a lot of time focused on the markets, and you know, do you have any insight for anyone out there? I mean, obviously not specific stocks or anything like that, but really just, you know, where do you see things going, and what can people do from a safety perspective right now?
I don't know how many people on the call are in our program, probably about half, I don't know. But one thing we did was we decided to step up. People in the regular program only get an investment live webinar every 2 months, but we decided to make it every Tuesday until the Dow goes back to 30,000. So we may be doing this for the next 6 months, the next 6 years. I don't know.
Yeah.
But one thing we're doing is we're talking about the current environment right now where there's opportunity. And you know, you saw my post from about an hour ago. Our latest featured company report wasn't a company report, it was an index fund. And I just got a text from a member of our program who made 42% in a few days off of that index fund. So yeah, I mean, those of us who invest, we've seen our portfolio take a tremendous hit. I mean, most of us have, I know I have.
Yeah.
But this is exactly why we have this particular kind of get together about resilience. And, you know, events like this can define you.
Yes.
Right? Events like this, obviously the bad part we'll just put over here. We know that, yeah. But if we talk about what this can mean, it can be a springboard to just
Yes.
kind of step into your purpose.
Yeah.
And that particular group of people that can benefit most from that purpose. So
Yeah.
for us, getting back to what we're doing, we're supporting our people big time with the investment. And again, next Tuesday, we're talking about a company, roughly 20% plus of their sales come from Amazon.com. And we're talking about probably $4 billion We're talking about that company next Tuesday at 9 a.m. And that's probably going to be another one that goes up, not 40%, but probably 100%.
Okay.
So we're helping, but no advice. We don't provide advice. We just provide research.
Absolutely.
So, but I just want to be clear. We're not an investment company. The Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise coaching program is a full complement of conversations around everything related to becoming healthy, wealthy, and wise, primarily about how you think about yourself in that process.
That's great. That's really good. So, Derrick, we've got a question here from Alex. And Alex, do you want to go ahead and give us your question?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Are you?
I got you.
Mute or am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
Let me. Hey, you made yes. Thumbs up.
You're unmuted.
So the question. I mean, you highlighted all the aspects that have been affected by this pandemic. Society, health, business, and so on. What do you think the most enduring effect will be down the road for society and for all of us as human beings?
So what do you think the most enduring effect will be, Derrick, of this pandemic?
Well, depending on what you're looking at, certainly in the space of pharmaceuticals and vaccines, I can tell you one thing, that there will be a vaccine that comes out of this. And I'm going to make a prediction. Your kids aren't getting into school unless they take this vaccine. And you're not going to get on that airplane unless you can prove you had that vaccine. That's one thing that's probably in our future.
Yeah.
And I also think it's going to have an impact on how we spend time in leisure. You know, for those people that you know who love those boats, those cruise ships, you know, every time I see a report about everyone on the ship getting diarrhea, I'm like, that's not fun. I don't want, no, pass. Now, forget diarrhea, COVID-19, they could die. So I think industries like, you know, the cruise ships, I think they're going to have a very difficult time coming back. And right now there's over 400 cruise line businesses. And I think by the time this is all over, there's probably going to be about 40 of them left.
Right.
Now, I you know, that question you gave us has many different areas we could focus on. I'm not sure if I'm addressing what you wanted to hear. You can elaborate on that if you want to. But as far as what's going to be an enduring kind of condition or new normal, certainly I think it's how we spend our time in leisure, but it's also how we spend our time in our career. I think there's going to be a lot more people now looking at how they're spending their time with their career, saying, whoa, how can I work from home? I want to get out of this. You know, look what can happen. My company that I have, think about it. I really have no control over what my company decides to do. What can I do so I have that control as far as my income is concerned? So I think for some businesses like Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise, hey, we're going to pivot off of this. There's going to be so many people that gravitate towards our business model.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
you know, there's nothing that gets in the way of your ambition. No one.
Absolutely. No, I agree. So we got a question here from our Facebook Live feed, Derrick. Any advice to people who are just starting a business?
Well, you sure picked a good time.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you this, it's going to get a lot easier after this. And here's one thing we can learn from people who are experts in predicting the economy and indirectly your business in relationship to your question. You know, today there was more than, what was it, 6.6 million people reported to have applied for unemployment. That's a record. That is an all-time record. Yet the stock market rallied. So that tells you a lot. You know, here's the thing. You can weigh the powers of good against the powers of evil. You can weigh the powers of optimism over the powers of negativism. And positivism always works long term, which is why the stock market looks like this long term, not like this, like this.
Yeah.
You know, so you have to answer your question more specifically, you have to stay positive in this environment. I know it's difficult. That's why we get together on these calls. And the first thing we do is we acknowledge, yes, this is difficult. Yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm. The next question is more important though. What can I do about it? What power do I have despite what's going on? What choices can I make despite what's going on? And more importantly, perhaps the most important is, how can I add value right now to others despite this going on? And how will that grow my business long term?
Yeah.
Babe?
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, that's it. I mean, like at the end of the day, you know, my answer to that would be actually the same as yours. And that is that any business, it doesn't matter what you're doing, cutting hair, you go down to the barber and the barber doesn't add value. Guess what? You're not going back. You know, I mean, you know, if you go in with sort of nice hair and you come out with awful hair, and the barber doesn't know what they're doing, guess what? You're not going back. And so when you think about any kind of business, you got to add value. And I think this is so important. Whatever you do, you've got to add more heart to it, you know, than maybe you did back in the day. I think in spite of the big proclamation, social distancing, which by the way, is probably the dumbest term that's ever been invented, besides military intelligence. There's an old joke for you. But, you know, when in spite of the social distancing, what's happening is people are actually coming closer together. And I think that's because when we're told to stay apart, we actually react by seeking to come together. Now, not physically, because we all want to be safe, but almost spiritually, there's a coming together. Socially, in terms of connectivity, there is. And I think that people are going to judge you in the future, not just by the quality of the product that you're selling, but the heart that you're selling it with, right? Who's behind the product? What do they stand for? And it can't just be, you know, I'm just going to say it, this bullshit virtue signaling that people get into. It has to be authentic, right? It can't just be, I went and talked to my media strategist and got a press release that said I need to say this and say that. No, you need to come from the heart. You need to be authentic. You need to be transparent. And then in that mindset and in that model, it's amazing the level of connectivity that will happen. So folks, that's what business is all about, I think, post-COVID, and not just business, but frankly, life. I think there's going to be a lot of shedding, you know, where people shed the stuff, the relationships, the connections that aren't that meaningful, and they draw closer together to those connections that are. So I hope that makes sense. So we've got time for one more question, you know, and then we're going to send Derrick on his way back to his horses and his dogs. How many horses do you have, by the way, Derrick?
4.
Okay, and you love them all, eh?
Yep.
Yeah.
They're fun.
Okay.
Good therapy.
So that's great. So Amy is saying in the chat box, I went to a new hairdresser once who gave me a spectacular haircut and color. That's what I did too, as you can tell, but made me feel uncomfortable the whole time. Cool. I never went back. My coworkers tried the new hairdresser, had the same experience. Thanks for that, Amy. We all agreed with each other that we prefer friendliness, over technical skill. So good. So Derrick, just as we close the interview portion of this off, are any final words of wisdom? Because I know you've got a lot. You're like a fountain of wisdom.
You're too kind. You're too kind. Well, especially if there's anyone on the call who's still like, I didn't get what I came here for. You're still a little bit maybe agitated or maybe not as optimistic as you'd like to be. I want you to think of your life a year out from now.
Yes.
Okay. And you'll remember this as a memory, And I want you to realize that you're in the power right now. You're in control, that you can create that memory right now by the choices you're making today. If you just remember that, you're going to be much more likely to only make good choices, or primarily make good choices as far as that memory of where you are right now. A year from now, when you're looking back at how you navigated through this, will be a good memory. And if it's a good memory and there was a lot of challenges and obstacles, that means there's going to be growth. That means you've grown physically, spiritually, maybe even financially. And that's really our goal in this webinar today, to, just try to offer some help. I mean, we don't have all the answers. I mean, we don't even have half of them.
No.
We have some, and you don't need all of them. You just need a couple that you kind of gravitate towards.
Yeah. I love that, Derrick. Thank you so much. And Derrick, honestly, lots of great comments in the chat box, and thank you. Now, as we bring this to a close, I want to just reiterate a couple of the things that Derrick said, and of course, we've been saying too, within crisis, there are always seeds of opportunity, right? And one of my favorite books, it's on my shelf over there, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Not that I'm into warfare, but I am into strategy. And what Sun Tzu said is, in the midst of chaos, there's also opportunity. Well, we've seen chaos in COVID-19. And I think for those who are resilient, they're also seeing opportunity. And I love what he also said. He said, opportunities multiply as they are seized, right? And so the more you take advantage of opportunity, the more those opportunities will come to you. But I also like this, and this is why in this webinar and in this series, we're not just talking about business, we're also talking about self-care. Because I love what he said. He said, victorious warriors win first and then go to war. Isn't that amazing, right? In other words, you've got to win the battle here, you got to win the battle in your heart and your mind first. And then look at what he says. He says, defeated warriors go to war first and then win, right? And I'll tell you, that is a lot of wisdom. And so, you don't get to choose the situation. You just don't. I wish you did. You don't. I know that we like to consider ourselves to be masters of our own destiny, but the truth is there's so many non-controllables out there, and yet you do get to choose your story and your strategy. And so I just kind of have two questions for you and for everyone today. Number one, what story are you telling yourself to get through COVID-19? And I really encourage you to tell yourself a story of hope, of possibility, of opportunity. In no way does that mean, bury your head in the sand or not tell yourself the truth. Actually, it's the precise opposite. People who are truly intentional and resilient, these are the folks who look the truth square in the eye, but they don't allow the negative side of that interpretation to be how they see it. They want to focus on the positive. And so this is a great question to ask. What story are you telling yourself? But here's the second thing. What strategy are you going to use to get through COVID-19? Because guess what, folks? We're here. The shock of this, especially for those of you who are in North America, Canada, it's kind of wearing off now. Now we are isolated. Most political leaders are saying this is probably until the end of May, maybe the end of June, depending on where you are. I know that Trump is hoping to reopen America by end of April, but there's not a lot of folks who think that that can happen, or at least go back to normal. So I think it's time to start thinking about, strategically, like, how am I going to get through this? Yeah, apply for the government help, do whatever you can do to take advantage of the resources that are there. But I also think part of it is starting to look at what is your strategy? How's your self-care in the middle of this crisis, making sure that you're leaning into that. And to be really honest, I mean, Derrick and I, it not our intention to come on this webinar and sell Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise. Why? Because Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise sells itself. It is a program that offers you so much, and you can see it on the screen. And so I would just love to, for those of you who are interested, create maybe an opportunity for a support call at no cost, with me or a member of my team. Just send me an email, send me a Facebook message, right? Shoot me a text message, whatever, send a smoke signal, whatever you've got to do. I've been doing so many of these, and there's no cost. And I can promise you, it's not about the sell. It's about
Abe,
support.
can I just get one thing in?
Yeah.
It's not a sell, it's just a public service announcement, you could say. It's just kind of a sell, but not to sound too salesy. But I mean, it's a disservice for those of you on the call who are looking for opportunity and want to make money. It's a disservice not to tell you that we have a new addition to the Healthy, Wealthy, and Wise Platinum program coming out, soft launching May 15th, called the Platinum Pro program, where if you have 10 clients who have 10 clients, your annual coaching performance bonus is $200,000 paid on a quarterly basis. This is for people who want to lead, they want to grow, and they want to serve others and want to make a difference. So reach out to Abe. Abe, I'd be happy to come back and give a presentation to those who are interested.
Okay.
Like the one we had with Coaching Wealth TV a couple of weeks ago. I'd be happy to come back and, go into the business model and everything that's included.
Yeah. Well, and I love that, Derrick. And so if you're interested in that, folks, just send me an email. Cynthia was kind enough to throw her email in there, or my email, abe@momentumcoach.ca. But reach out and be great to have you. So we got, I think, a question from Mike just before we go. Mike, Mike, are you there? Let me just see if I can get him. We'll just give it 2 seconds here. Mike, are you there, my friend?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
How's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. Sorry, I didn't have a chance to join the conference from the beginning.
Hey, no problem. And I've got your email. I'm going to respond. Don't worry.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. So what's up, my friend? Do you have a question for Derrick?
Just like it's more for the marketing way. Like, what do you think is the best approach for marketing in these days for what you presented? Like,
Well, I think, Mike, it's a great question, because it's the big question everyone is asking. And I mean, for sure, I think authenticity needs to be a big part of that equation. I think that what we're talking about in this day and age is engaging people with real world solutions, with real heart-centered authenticity, and adding value, right? And again, if even our hairdressers don't add that extra value, we're not going to go back to them. So how much more people who are in this kind of a space, And so that's a great question, Mike. Thanks for that. And so reach out next week in our Business Resilience Now webinar. We've got a dentist, and you might say, well, why would you have a dentist? Well, this Dr. Jan Jaffer is actually the CEO of what's called Trek Dental. I think they have 15 dental offices here in Calgary. I believe they have almost 200 employees. And so here's a guy who is having to navigate COVID-19 through one of the greatest health challenges our generation will probably ever see. And so he's going to tune in and share some of the things that he has learned. I've spoken at their events. They have an incredible culture, and he is a super good guy. So please do tune in next week, same time, same place. That's 11:45 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. And one final thought, listen, to all of the frontline workers out there who serve our communities and keep us safe and healthy. Honestly, we really do. We see you, we thank you, and we honor you, especially the folks who are in the Tim Hortons drive-thrus and working in the Sobeys and the Safeways. You guys are crushing it. And so thanks for that. We're so grateful. And thanks, Derrick. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
All right,
See you next
everybody.
time.
Take care.
Bye.
See you now.